This is the weirdest evolution story about a mad scientist who accelerated his body 300 million years into the future in a dangerous experiment gone terribly wrong.
There were 3 of us in Pollard's house on that night that I try vainly to forget. Dr. John Pollard himself, Hugh Dutton and I, Arthur Wright, we were the 3. Pollard met that night a fate whose horror none could dream. Dutton has since that night inhabited a state institution reserved for the insane, and I alone am left to tell what happened. It was on Pollard's invitation that Dutton and I went up to his isolated cottage. We 3 had been friends and roommates at the New York Technical University. Our friendship was perhaps a little unusual, for Pollard was a number of years older than Dutton and myself and was different in temperament, being rather quieter by nature. He had followed an intensive course of biological studies too, instead of the ordinary engineering courses Dutton and I had taken. As Dutton and I drove northward along the Hudson on that afternoon, we found ourselves reviewing what we knew of Pollard's career. After he studied under Braun, the Vienna biologist whose theories had stirred up such turmoil, we had heard that he had plunged himself in private research at this country house beside the Hudson he had inherited. But since then, we had had no word from him and had been somewhat surprised to receive his telegrams inviting us to spend the weekend with him. It was drawing into early summer twilight when Dutton and I reached Pollard's place. Pollard himself came out to greet us.
Why, you boys have grown up.
That's the sobering effect of commercial life. It hasn't touched you, you old oyster. You look the same as you did 5 years ago.
He did too, his lanky figure and slow smile and curiously thoughtful eyes having changed not a jot. Yet Pollard's bearing seemed to show some rather more than usual excitement, and I commented on it.
If I seem a little excited, it's because this is a great day for me.
Well, you are in luck to get 2 fine fellows like Dutton and me to trail up to this hermitage of yours.
As for my hermitage, as you call it, don't say a word against it. I've been able to do work here I could never have done amid the distractions of a city laboratory. If you 2 knew what, but you'll hear it soon enough. Let's get inside.
Pollard escorted us on a tour of inspection of the place. We were most interested in his laboratory. It was a small wing he had added to the house. Inside offered a gleaming vista of white-tiled walls and polished instruments. A big cube-like structure of transparent metal, surmounted by a huge metal cylinder resembling a monster vacuum tube, took up the room's center. We then sat smoking for a while in his living room, Dutton looking appreciatively around at our comfortable surroundings. "What in the world have you been working at? Something so unholy you've had to keep it hidden here?" I asked. Pollard chuckled.
That's what they think down in the village. They know I'm a biologist and have a laboratory here. So it's a foregone conclusion with them that I'm doing vivisection of a specially dreadful nature. As a matter of fact, if they knew down in the village what I've really been working on, they'd be 10 times as fearful as they are now. I asked you up here to see what I've been doing and help me finish it.
Help you? What can we help you do? Dissect worms. Some weekend, I can see right now.
There's more to this than dissecting worms. Do you 2 have any knowledge at all of evolution? It is my work up here. I'll try to make this clear to you from the start. You know the main steps of evolutionary development. Life began on this earth as simple protoplasm, a jelly-like mass from which developed small protoplasmic organisms. From these developed in turn sea creatures, land lizards, mammals, by successive mutations. This infinitely slow evolutionary process has reached its highest point so far in the mammal man, and is still going on with the same slowness. This much is certain biological knowledge, but 2 great questions concerning this process of evolution have remained hitherto unanswered. First, what is the cause of evolutionary change, the cause of these slow, steady mutations into higher forms? Second, what is the future course of man's evolution going to be? What will be the forms into which in the future man will evolve? And where will his evolution stop? Those two questions biology has so far been unable to answer.
Pollard was silent a moment and then said quietly,
I have found the answer to one of those questions, and am going to find the answer to the other tonight.
Are you trying to spoof us?
I'm absolutely serious, Arthur. I have actually solved the first of those problems. I have found the cause of evolution.
What is it then?
What it has been thought by some biologists for years to be. The cosmic rays, the shortest wavelength and most highly penetrating of all vibratory forces. I have proved that they have an effect upon the life on Earth, and that the effect is what we call evolution.
Good Lord, you can't be serious on this. Pollard.
I am so serious that I am going to stake my life on my discovery tonight.
What do you mean?
I mean that I have found in the cosmic rays the cause of evolution, the answer to the first question, and that tonight, by means of them, I am going to answer the second question and find out what the future evolutionary development of man will be.
But how could you possibly?
Easily enough. I have been able to concentrate the cosmic rays and yet remove from them their harmful properties. You saw the cylinder over the metal cube in my laboratory. That cylinder literally gathers in, from an immense distance, the cosmic rays that strike this part of Earth and reflects them down inside the cube. Now suppose those concentrated cosmic rays, millions of times stronger than the ordinary cosmic rays that strike one spot on Earth, fall upon a man standing inside the cube. What will be the result? What about the man under those terrifically intensified rays? He will be changed millions of times faster than ordinarily through the evolutionary mutations that all mankind will go forward through in eons to come.
And you propose to try that experiment?
I propose to try it on myself and to find out for myself the evolutionary changes that await humankind.
Why? It's insane.
Dutton's right. Pollard, you've worked here alone too long. You've let your mind become warped.
No, I am sane. Perhaps wonderfully sane in trying this. Can't you two see what this may mean to humanity? As we are to the apes, so must the men of the future be to us. If we could use this method of mine to take all mankind forward through millions of years of evolutionary development at one stride, wouldn't it be sane to do so?
My mind was whirling. Good heavens, the whole thing is so crazy, I protested. To accelerate the evolution of the human race, it seems somehow a thing forbidden. And you asked us up here to take part in that.
Just that. I mean to enter the cube and let the concentrated rays whirl me forward along the paths of evolution. But I must have someone to turn the rays on and off at the right moments. We will go to the laboratory now. I am eager to get started.
I cannot remember following Pollard and Dutton to the laboratory. My thoughts were spinning so at the time. It was not until we stood before the great cube from which the huge metal cylinder towered that I was aware of the reality of it all. As Dutton and I stared wordlessly at the cylinder and cube, we heard the hum of motor generators. Pollard came back to the switchboard supported in a steel frame, and as he closed a switch there came a crackling, and the cylinder glowed with white light.
The cylinder is now gathering cosmic rays from an immense area of space, and those concentrated rays are falling through that disk into the cube's interior. To cut off the rays, it is necessary only to open this switch.
He reached to open the switch. The light died. Quickly, while we stared, he removed his clothing, donning in place of it a loose white running suit.
I will want to observe the changes of my own body as much as possible. Now I will stand inside the cube, and you will turn on the rays and let them play upon me for 15 minutes. Roughly, that should represent a period of some 50 million years of future evolutionary change. At the end of 15 minutes, You will turn the rays off, and we will be able to observe what changes they have caused. We will then resume the process, going forward by 15-minute, or rather, 50 million year periods.
But where will it stop? Where will we quit the process?
We'll stop where evolution stops. That is, where the rays no longer affect me. You know, biologists have often wondered what the last change or final development of man will be, the last mutation. Well, we are going to see tonight what it will be.
He stepped up into the cube, standing directly beneath the disc in its ceiling. He motioned imperatively, and like an automaton, I closed the door and then threw the switch. The cylinder broke again into glowing white light, and as the shafts of glowing white force shot down from the disc in the cube's ceiling upon Pollard, we glimpsed his whole body writhing as though beneath a terrifically concentrated electrical force. The shaft of glowing emanations almost hid him from our view. Dutton and I stared with beating hearts into the cubicle chamber, having but fleeting glimpses of Pollard's form. My watch was in one hand, the other hand on the switch. The 15 minutes that followed seemed to me to pass with the slowness of 15 eternities. At last, the watch's hand marked the quarter hour, and I snapped off the switch. The light of the cylinder and inside the cube dying. Exclamations burst from us both. Pollard stood inside the cube, staggering as though still dazed by the impact of the experience, but he was not the Pollard who had entered the chamber. He was transfigured, godlike. His body had literally expanded into a great figure of such physical power and beauty as we had not imagined could exist. He was many inches taller and broader, his skin a clear pink, every limb and muscle molded as though by some master sculptor. The greatest change, though, was in his face. Pollard's homely, good-humored features were gone, replaced by a face whose perfectly cut features held the stamp of immense intellectual power that shone almost overpoweringly from the dear, dark eyes. It was not Pollard who stood before us, I told myself, but a being as far above us as the most advanced man of today is above the troglodyte. He was stepping out of the cube, and his voice reached our ears, clear and bell-like, triumphant.
You see? It worked as I knew it would work. I'm 50 million years ahead of the rest of humanity in evolutionary development.
Pollard, this is terrible. This change.
Why, all this laboratory and former work of mine seems infinitely petty, childish to me. The problems that I worked on for years, I could solve now in minutes. I could do more for mankind now than all the men now living could do together.
Then you're going to stop at this stage? You're not going further with this?
Of course I am. If 50 million years development makes this much change in man, what will 100 million years, 200 million make? I'm going to find that out.
I grasped his hand. Pollard, listen to me. Your experiment has succeeded, has fulfilled your wildest dreams. Stop it now. Think what you can accomplish, man. I know your ambition has always been to be one of humanity's great benefactors. By stopping here, you can be the greatest. You can be a living proof to mankind of what your process can make it, and with that proof before it, all humanity will be eager to become the same as you. He freed himself from my grasp.
No, Arthur. I have gone part of the way into humanity's future, and I'm going on.
He stepped back into the chamber while Dutton and I stared helplessly. It seemed half a dream. The laboratory, the cubicle chamber, the godlike figure inside that was and still was not Pollard.
Turn on the rays and let them play for 15 minutes more. It will project me ahead another 50 million years.
His eyes and voice were imperative, and I glanced at my watch and snicked over the switch. Again the cylinder broke into light, again the shaft of force shot down into the cube to hide Pollard's splendid figure. Dutton and I waited with feverish intensity in the next minutes. Pollard was standing still beneath the broad shaft of force, and so was hidden in it from our eyes. What would its lifting disclose? Would he have changed still more into some giant form, or would he be the same, having already reached humanity's highest possible development? When I shut off the mechanism at the end of the appointed period, Dutton and I received a shock. For again, Pollard had changed. He was no longer the radiant, physically perfect figure of the first metamorphosis. His body instead seemed to have grown thin and shriveled, the outlines of bones visible through its flesh. His body, indeed, seemed to have lost half its bulk and many inches of stature and breadth, but these were compensated for by the change in his head. For the head, supported by this weak body, was an immense bulging balloon that measured fully 18 inches from brow to back. It was almost entirely hairless, its great mass balanced precariously upon his slender shoulders and neck. And his face, too, was changed greatly, the eyes larger and the mouth smaller, the ears seeming smaller also. The great bulging forehead dominated the face. Could this be Pollard? His voice sounded thin and weak to our ears.
You are surprised to see me this time. Well, you see a man 100 million years ahead of you in development. And I must confess that you appear to me as two brutish, hairy cavemen would appear to you.
But Pollard, this is awful. This change is more terrible than the first. If you had only stopped at the first.
The eyes of the shriveled, huge-headed figure in the cube fired with anger.
Stop at that first stage. I'm glad now that I didn't. The man I was 15 minutes ago, 50 million years ago in development, seems now to me to have been half animal. What was his big, animal-like body beside my immense brain?
You say that because in this change, you're getting away from all human emotions and sentiments, I burst. Pollard, do you realize what you're doing? You're changing out of human semblance.
I realize it perfectly, and I see nothing to be deplored in the fact. It means that in 100 million years, man will be developing in brain capacity and will care nothing for the development of body. To me, it is desirable and natural. Turn on the rays again.
Don't do it. Art, this madness has gone far enough.
Pollard's great eyes surveyed us with cold menace.
You will turn on the rays. If you do not, it will be but the work of a moment for me to annihilate both of you and go on with this alone.
You'd annihilate us? We two of your best friends? His narrow mouth seemed to sneer.
Friends? I am millions of years past such irrational emotions as friendship. The only emotion you awaken in me is a contempt for your crudity. Turn on the rays.
His eyes blazed as he snapped the last order, and as though propelled by a force outside myself, I closed the switch. The shaft of glowing force again hid him from our view. The change had continued, and Pollard, I could not call him that in my own mind, stood in the cube chamber as a shape the sight of which stunned our minds. He had become simply a great head. A huge hairless head, fully a yard in diameter, supported on tiny legs, the arms having dwindled to mere hands that projected just below the head. The eyes were enormous, saucer-like, but the ears were mere pinholes at either side of the head, the nose and mouth being similar holes below the eyes. He was stepping out of the chamber on his ridiculously little limbs, and as Dutton and I reeled back in unreasoning horror, his voice came to us as an almost inaudible piping. And it held pride.
You tried to keep me from going on, and you see what I have become. To such as you, no doubt, I seem terrible, yet you two and all like you seem as low to me as the worms that crawl.
Good God, Pollard, you've made yourself a monster. The words burst from me without thought. His enormous eyes turned on me.
You call me Pollard, yet I am no more the Pollard you knew, and who entered that chamber first, then you are the ape of millions of years ago from whom you sprang. And all mankind is like you two. Well, they will all learn the powers of one who is 150 million years in advance of them.
What do you mean?
I mean that with the colossal brain I have, I will master without a struggle this man's swarming planet, and make it a huge laboratory in which to pursue the experiments that please me.
But Pollard, remember why you started this, to go ahead and chart the path of future evolution for humanity. To benefit humanity and not to rule it.
I remember that the creature Pollard that I was, until tonight, had such foolish ambitions. Yes, it would stir mirth now, if I could feel such an emotion? To benefit humanity? Do you men dream of benefiting the animal you rule over? Do you two yet realize that I am so far ahead of you in brain power now as you are ahead of the beasts that perish? Look at this.
He had climbed onto a chair beside one of the laboratory table, was reaching among the retorts and apparatus there. Swiftly, he poured several compounds into a lead mortar, added others, poured upon the mixed contents another mixture made as swiftly. There was a puff of intense green smoke from the mortar instantly, and then the great head, I can only call him that, turned the mortar upside down. A lump of shining mottled metal fell out, and we gasped as we recognized the yellow sheen of pure gold.
You see, what is the transformation of elements to a mind like mine? You two cannot even realize the scope of my intelligence. I can destroy all life on this earth from this room, if I desire. I can construct a telescope that will allow me to look on the planets, the farthest galaxies. I can send my mind forth to make contact with other minds without the slightest material connection. And you think it terrible that I should rule your race. I will not rule them. I will own them and this planet as you might own a farm and animals.
You couldn't, I cried. Pollard, if there is anything of Pollard left in you, give up that thought. We'll destroy you ourselves before we'll let you start a monstrous rule of men. We had started desperately forward toward the great head, but stopped suddenly in our tracks as his great eyes met ours. I found myself walking backward to where I had stood, walking back and Dutton with me, like two automatons.
So you two would try to destroy me. Why, I could direct you without a word to destroy yourselves, and you do so in an instant. What chance has your puny will and brain against mine? And what chance will all the force of men have against me when a glance from me will make them puppets of my will?
A desperate inspiration flashed through my brain. Pollard, wait, I exclaimed. You were going on with the process, with the rays. If you stop here, you'll not know what changes lie beyond your present form.
That is true. And though it seems impossible to me that by going on I can attain to greater intelligence than I now have, I want to find out for certain.
Then you'll go under the rays for another 15 minutes?
I will. But lest you harbor any foolish ideas, you may know that even inside the chamber, I will be able to read your thoughts and can annihilate both of you before you can make a move to harm me.
He stepped up into the chamber again, and as I reached for the switch, Dutton trembling beside me, we glimpsed for a moment the huge head before the down-smiting white force hid it from our sight. It seemed hours before I reached at last to snap off the rays. We gazed into the chamber, shaking. At first glance, the great head inside seemed unchanged, but then we saw that it had changed, and greatly. Instead of being a skin-covered head with at least rudimentary arms and legs, it was now a great grey head-like shape of even greater size, supported by two grey muscular tentacles. The surface of this grey head thing was wrinkled and folded, and its only features were two eyes as small as our own.
Oh my God, he's changing from a head into a brain. He's losing all human appearance.
Into our minds came a thought from the grey head thing before us, a thought as clear as though spoken.
You have guessed it, for even my former head body is disappearing, all atrophying except the brain. I am become a walking, seeing brain. As I am, so all of your race will be in 200 million years, gradually losing more and more of their atrophied bodies and developing more and more their great brains.
His eyes seemed to read us.
You need not fear now the things I threatened in my last stage of development. My mind, grown infinitely greater, would no more now want to rule you men and your little planet than you would want to rule an anthill and its inhabitants. My mind, gone 50 million years further ahead in development, can soar out now to vistas of power and knowledge unimagined by me in that last stage and unimaginable to you.
Great God, Pollard. What have you become?
Pollard.
Dutton was laughing hysterically.
You call that thing Pollard? Why, we had dinner with Pollard 3 hours ago. He was a human being, and not a thing like this.
I have become what all men will become in time. I have gone this far along the road of man's future evolution, and am going on to the end of that road. Am going to attain the development that the last mutation possible will give me. Turn on the rays. I think that I must be approaching now the last possible mutation.
I snapped over the switch again, and the white shaft of the concentrated rays veiled from us the great grey shape. I felt my own mind giving beneath the strain of horror of the last hour, and Dutton was still half hysterical. With every nerve keyed to highest tension, I threw open the switch at last. The rays ceased, and the figure in the chamber was again revealed. Dutton began to laugh shrilly, and then abruptly was sobbing. I do not know whether I was doing the same, though I have a dim memory of mouthing incoherent things as my eyes took in the shape in the chamber. It was a great brain. It lay in the chamber, its surface ridged and wrinkled by innumerable fine convolutions. It had no features or limbs of any kind in its grey mass. It was simply a huge brain whose only visible sign of life was its slow twitching movement. From it, thoughts beat strongly into our own horror-weighted brains.
You see me now, a great brain only, just as all men will be far in the future. Yes, you might have known, I might have known, when I was like you, that this would be the course of human evolution, that the brain that alone gives man dominance would develop, and the body that hampers that brain would atrophy until he would have developed into pure brain, as I now am. I have no features, no senses that I could describe to you, yet can realize the universe infinitely better than you can with your elementary senses. I am aware of planes of existence you cannot imagine. I can feed myself with pure energy without the need of a cumbersome body to transform it, and I can move and act despite my lack of limbs, by means and with a speed and power utterly beyond your comprehension. If you still have fear of the threats I made, 2 stages back against your world and race, banish them. I am pure intelligence now, and as such, though I can no more feel the emotions of love or friendship, neither can I feel those of ambition or pride. The only emotion, if such it is, that remains to me still is intellectual curiosity, and this desire for truth that has burned in man since his apehood will thus be the last of all desires to leave him.
A great brain, here in Pollard's laboratory. But where's Pollard? He was here too,
said Dutton deliriously. Then all men will someday be as you are now, I cried.
Yes, in 250 million years, man as you know him and as you are will be no more. And after passing all the stages through which I have passed through tonight, the human race will have developed into great brains, inhabiting not only your solar system, no doubt, but the systems of other stars.
And that's the end of man's evolutionary road. That is the highest point that he will reach?
No, I think he will change still from those great brains into still a higher form. And I am going to find out now what that higher form will be. For I think this will be the last mutation of all, and that with it, I will reach the end of man's evolutionary path. You will turn on the rays now, and in 15 minutes, we will know what that last and highest form is.
My hand was on the switch, but Dutton had staggered to me, was clutching my arm.
Don't, Arthur. We've seen horrors enough. Let's not see the last. Let's get out of here.
I can't, I cried. Oh God, I want to stop, but I can't now. I want to see the end myself. I've got to see.
Turn on the rays.
The end of the road, the last mutation. We've got to see. I drove the switch home. The rays flashed down again to hide the great grey brain in the cube. Dutton's eyes were staring fixedly. He was clinging to me. As the hand reached the appointed minute, I pulled open the switch, rushed forward with Dutton to the cube's very edge. The great grey brain that had been inside it was gone. There lay on the cube's floor, instead of it, a quite shapeless mass of clear, jelly-like matter. It was quite motionless, save for a slight quivering. My shaking hand went forth to touch it, and then it was that I screamed, such a scream as all the tortures of hell's crudest fiends could not have wrung from a human throat. The mass inside the cube was a mass of simple protoplasm. This then was the end of man's evolution, the highest form to which time would bring him, the last mutation of all. The road of man's evolution was a circular one, returning to its beginning. From the earth's bosom had risen the first crude organisms, then sea creature and land creature and mammal and ape to man, and from man it would rise in the future through all the forms we had seen that night. There would be supermen, bodiless heads, pure brains, only to be changed by the last mutation of all into the protoplasm from which first it had sprung. I do not know now exactly what followed. I know that I rushed upon that quivering, quiescent mass, calling Pollard's name madly and shouting things I am glad I cannot remember. I know that Dutton was shouting too, with insane laughter, and that as he struck with lunatic howls and fury about the laboratory, the crash of breaking glass and the hiss of escaping gases was in my ears. And then from those mingling acids, bright flames were leaping and spreading sudden fires that alone, I think now, saved my own sanity. For I can remember dragging the insanely laughing Dutton from the room, from the house, into the cool darkness of the night. And I remember that as I saw Dutton's crazy laughter by that crimson light, I knew that he would laugh thus until he died. So ends my narrative of the end that came to Pollard and Pollard's house. It is, as I said in the beginning, a narrative that I only can tell now, for Dutton has never spoken a sane word since. In the institution where he now is, they think his condition the result of shock from the fire, just as Pollard was believed to have perished in that fire. I have never until now told the truth.